introduce our next speaker. Of course, the topic, as I alluded to, is leading in times of vulnerability, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Now, our next speaker is definitely not a stranger when it comes to this particular topic. She has been called upon by organizations such as ENS Africa, Marsh and McLennan, the Discovery Group, Saint Gobain, Volkswagen, and other individuals speaking to you on the issue of unlearning. And she has been dubbed the Unlearning Lady. Now, of course, she transitions transition facilitator as well as futurist. She is also the host of the well-rated podcast Future Fit Fridays, hosting conversations with global experts on the future of work. Zanele is a contributor to the thought leadership section of the Mail and Guardian and was voted is number 45 on the advanced media list of top 100 most influential young South Africans back in 2019. So it's quite an honor to be in this particular session. And Zanele, you can just start off with your opening remarks.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Really, really appreciate it. So great to be in your presence today with all of you. Giamo, I love your smile. I think that's the face I'm going to keep looking at as I continue with the session. Prince, I don't know if that's your real picture or you just have one of those, but it's great to see all of you. It's great to be here this morning or / afternoon, I guess, depending on where you are. And that introduction is pretty much right. That's who I am, and this change stuff, this future of work stuff is what I do consistently on a daily basis. But today I really want to focus a lot more on engagement. I want to, as much as I am going to present a few insights and some of my thoughts and what my team and I have been tracking, I really want to focus more or less on just having a conversation, because I believe in conversations a lot more than I believe in presentations, because sometimes presentations can position me as the expert and other people not so much. So I love to have conversations because I feel like there's a lot more we can gain from each other when we do that type of engagement. So I think that I'll definitely just run through my presentation, but I do want to leave a chunk of the time for Q&A and for engagement across all of us. So I've prepared a few slides, and as we implied, the topic was leading in VUCA times. And I remember, goodness, the first time I heard that word, I thought, oh goodness, what's this about? Is this a recreation of a Zulu word being said by a whole bunch of other people that are not Zulu? But actually wasn't the case. It's a very interesting concept. But I really like it because it helps us to really understand what it means to be living in the time that we're living in. My team and I have been giving a very big message. This is Team at Tomorrow Today Global. You see our logo on the bottom right-hand side. And the biggest message we've been giving to our clients at the moment is that COVID-19 is the least of your worries. And so many people and so many organizations at this time, and entrepreneurs more especially, I do some work with entrepreneurs as well, and startups have been really going, okay, so COVID-19 is going to be over soon. We can all sort of go back to normal, go back to what we're used to. But what we are saying is that COVID is actually the wake of so many other disruptions that are going to come and find you, from geopolitical related disruptions to policy related disruptions, environmental sustainability, AI, machine learning, whatever it is, really has been accelerated by COVID-19. So this term VUCA is really just exemplifies what these times are, where you just can't stop. I love this quote by Les Brown. He says that you literally have to run to stand still. And that's the times that we're living in, where we have to run to stand still just to be in the same place that you were last year. You have to literally run. You have to just keep moving. And that's the exciting, but also the daunting thing about the times that we live in. And to show you what I mean by this, have a look at the image that's on my screen. I love engagement. I have a past as a primary school teacher, so I am going to be checking in with you and asking for us to just get some conversations going every now and again. So have a look at the image that I have on my screen now, and just head over to the chat box and let me know what you think the mistake is in that picture. So I'm going to have a look at the chat box. There's a brownie for the first person to answer, whoever that is. So let me know, can you find the mistake? And if so, what is it? Take a few seconds and have a look at the image. What is the mistake in this picture? Brownie points for you. Anyone else want to? Chiamo, you say there's no mistake. Okay, I see someone says mistake is the mistake. All right. I love your thinking. I love your thinking. That's the exact same type of thinking that we need in this world. All right, Ellen, you also jumping on there saying the word mistake is the mistake. Okay, so have another look. Yes, you'll see if you go into the chat box, you'll see what Prince has said. That's the actual mistake that's in the image. But you know what? This image for me is just gold, because what it does for you and I, it exemplifies just in this one activity or in this one picture what these times are all about. They are all about so many different things. But while we're at that same predicament, you and I are being tricked by our lovely brains that we trust so much, because what our brains have been trained to do is look at the numbers, look at the colors, and we go, oh, that's where the mistakes are. So VUCA times really are all about how so many different things are interacting with each other all at once. And you and I have to keep our eyes sharp. We have to keep ourselves alert, even in times where things seem so different. And some people are saying mistake is the mistake, and there's two theirs, and this is going on, and the numbers are missing, and whatever else it is. So it's about, where do we keep our eyes? What should we be looking at? Where is the actual mistake in today's environment, in today's society, in today's businesses, in our ventures and investments, wherever it is that you are looking? Where should we be looking? And that, for me, is really one of the biggest takeaways that are really telling us that it's not a time to do more of the same thing. It's not. This is an opportunity, and I often say this, that this is an opportunity for us to hit the reset button and go, okay, so what COVID-19 has done is it's wiped the slate clean so that you and I can start afresh and almost rewrite the rules of what it means to be a business, of what it means to be efficient, to be productive, and to be at the top of our game as an organization, as a team, as even an individual. So definitely not. I will say this is not the time to do what you did in 2019. It's not even the time to do what you did in 2020. Because the things that you did in 2020, a colleague of mine, Piwe Moya, often says that in 2020, you and I were in defense mode. But this is the time for you and I to start getting into attack mode, rewriting the rules and understanding that the rules have changed. And what's going to get us into the rest of the 2020s, that is a disruptive decade, more than what we've often seen. And I love what Bill Gates says as well as Alvin Toffler, that really the rules are changing. And it's the organizations, it's the teams, it's the individuals that know how to move from one way of doing things to another way of doing things that are really going to make a name for themselves. And I want you to just take a second and ask yourself, is that you? Are you that organization? Are you that leader who can move nimbly, adaptively, flexibly from one thing to another? Or are you still going, oh, but that's not the way we've always done things around here? How do we turn the ship around? And so those of us that are going to see ourselves in a better position are the ones that can go, okay, let's readjust the sails and move straight to what we need to do, as we know is the nature of things. So I really love this quote, that it really positions this idea of learning and unlearning, that the rules are being rewritten. The way to make your way through the maze is really not the same way that we've been making our way through the maze. And I love, thank you so much to our chair who helped with introducing this term of VUCA, just so we understand what it's all about. And that volatility, that's a very big part of it, is the V, obviously, as you can see. The volatility just means that anything can change at any moment. It's so funny, when COVID-19 actually became an issue in South Africa, this was around March last year, people were going, okay, so 2 weeks at the office, it's fine. I can do 2 weeks. Oh, is it 2 weeks? And then, hey, and that's what volatility is about. It means at the drop of a hat, anything can change. And the situation is so sensitive to change that anything can happen. And that's how our businesses are set up nowadays. Because if someone makes a statement in Washington somewhere, it could change the way your business does something. If an earthquake takes place in a certain part of the world, it could change the way your business functions. And that's what volatility is about, and the uncertainty. I mean, you don't have to say that much, right? When we don't know what the next step is going to be, what's going to happen, what are we facing, what are we dealing with, what kind of animal is this really? It's like this idea of the novel coronavirus. We had nothing to go on. That's what businesses are facing today, where they have no cookie cutter that tells them how to deal with this type of disruption that we have at the moment. Complexity, though, must be one of my favorite ideas behind VUCA, because what complexity tells us is that you don't just look at something and go, okay, so I see it on the surface, I understand what it means, or I understand what it is. Think about the idea of global warming. Or think about the idea of, if you're in the South African context, you might think about ideas like land expropriation. You can't just understand those issues and some of the issues we face in businesses by looking at them at face value, because they are multi-layered. And that's the type of adaptive challenges that we have in today's business environments. And then the last one is ambiguous. And I want to show you exactly what I mean by this, with this idea of ambiguity. If you think about the image we did right in the beginning, it really helps us to understand what ambiguity is all about. When you look at something, but then it appears to be something else. And the workplaces of the 2020s need leaders who understand that ambiguity is the order of the day. You are working with individuals in your team that will see things in 1,000 different ways, even though you are all looking at the exact same business case. And I think that that's actually something that's quite exciting. It's a bit nerve-wracking, but it's quite exciting. Now, let me jump back onto this idea of ambiguity and just stick on that a little bit so you understand exactly what I mean. Have a look at the picture that's now on your screen. And then I want you to just look, what direction do you think that this image is moving in? Is it moving that way around, or is it rotating that way around? How about now? Has that changed? Now I might need to look at it really, really carefully. Ah. And now? And most of us would say, but I think it's changed. I think it changes, but it actually doesn't. It's exactly the same. It's just about where you focus. It's about where you look. It's about what you're looking at, and what factors have been introduced to the situation to make you see it differently. And that, for me, if there's nothing else that you take from this presentation today, that should be the one thing that you take away. It's that picture, and how that picture is so tricky that it makes you think, oh my goodness, am I okay? Am I seeing things? Because that's the type of world that we live in. And it's a world that needs individuals who are leading teams to really do three things, but do them all at once. And this is really what I've been advising a bunch of my clients to do at this time. You have to start by tracking. And this is why this idea of VUCA is so important, because it needs you and I to not just put our heads in the sand, but this is the time to track and understand and make sense of trends. What trends are influencing your industry at this time? Think about all of the things that are moving the wheels of the world at this moment, that are being talked about, that are being debated around business tables, whatever it is. What are those trends that you should be tracking? Because it's the individuals and the teams that are not tracking the trends that are the ones that end up falling behind. I mean, there are numerous examples that we can think of teams that didn't track and didn't see the little guy who was playing the new rewritten game that end up falling behind. And then the strategizing. How do we strategize around those trends? This is a time where you consistently need to strategize. I have so many teams that I work with that say that they still use, they still do their reviews or their quarterly reviews or whatever it is on the performance reviews on different individuals in the team. They'll do them every 6 months or every year. And I go, oh my goodness, how are you doing that? How are you doing that in such a fast-paced world? And this is the same for strategy. Strategy is an on-the-move game. And that's the way leaders need to start to think. If you are strategizing anew every year, and that's the only time you ever speak change to strategy, then you might have a bit of a problem. Because the nimble nature of the 2020s organization needs them to consistently be talking change of strategy. Now, I'm not saying each and every single day we sit around and huddle and change the strategy, but I'm saying it needs to be top of mind all the time. Because when a new player comes into the game that you didn't see coming, you need to understand, let's go back to track. How do we track what they're doing? What are they doing? How's it different? How are they speaking better to our client than we are? And then we strategize around those ideas. And then the last one for me, really, really important, is that implementation. Once we've tracked, we've made sense of those trends, we strategized around those trends, we need to implement. And implementation is really this great idea that I love to bring in design thinking. That means we empathize, but then we test. We are consistently putting products out into market that help us to sort of test what it is that we've understood about our markets anew, and we've understood about our future and our current client. So we're always putting stuff out, we're always testing, we're always living on the edge where we're going back and we're saying, okay, this has been tested. What are some of the things we've learned around this product, whether it's working, whether it's not? Is it the market? Is it not time? Whatever it is, how do we better introduce it? And then go right back to the drawing board. And that consistent cycle of doing things in that new way is exactly what makes the 2020s organization and the leader of the 2020s super, super unique and really a force, like I always say, an absolute force to be reckoned with. And so this is the main idea. The way we need to start to think, yes.
No, you can continue, you can go ahead.
Okay, no problem. So the way that we need to start to think and the way we need to start to act really is like entrepreneurs. And when we say this, and I'd love to get a few people's feedback, you can just almost say, hit me up. Goodness, I'm revealing my age. You can just go over to the chat box and let me know your thoughts on this. But I believe that at this stage of the world and in the way that we are currently in the business climate that we are currently in, it's the leaders that can think like entrepreneurs that are going to set themselves up for mass success in a consistently changing world. And when I say thinking entrepreneurially, I really mean thinking on your feet. If you think about a startup, what are some of the benefits to a startup compared to a larger multinational or big corporate organization? I'll just ask one person to maybe give me, one or two things that really puts a startup in a better position, or a smaller organization or enterprise in a better position than a multinational. Any hands? I'll look out for hands that go up. No red tape. Yes, Uno, love it. No red tape. Any other takers? You can put it in the chat box as well. That's perfectly all right. One that stands out for me while you do that is decision making. Think about how decisions can be taken a lot quicker and a lot easier in a smaller and a startup organization. And that, unfortunately, is where I found a lot of my clients are falling behind. They're trying to give their teams a lot of autonomy, but there is still this structure and this red tape, like Uno is saying, that is in the organization that somehow stops us from being nimble and adaptive. If we notice something is coming on the horizon, I can't afford to go to Bob first, and then Bob is going to go to Mandla, and then in 2 weeks' time, Mandla is going to say, okay, but the only other time that we're going to meet as an executive is in 3 weeks' time, so let's wait for that. Because that's just not the type of pace that we need. But if you're an entrepreneur and you have an entrepreneurship mindset, you're going to go, how can we bring that down so that that nimbleness and that adaptability of VUCA times is something that we thrive on and live in? So I want to introduce you to two different concepts, or three. Let me do three of them. 3 different transitions that you can take as an individual who is leading a team or leading yourself during VUCA times. There are 3 different transitions. And when you introduced me in the beginning, one of the things that you did mention is this transition facilitation that I do, helping organizations to move from one way of doing things to another, more complex, more adaptable way of doing things. So I'm going to talk about 3 different transitions. And if you'd like, I'd really advise that you write these down. So the first of these is denial to curiosity. Now, when we go through any kind of disruption, the default in our minds is to deny. because the brain doesn't like uncertainty. When the brain sees uncertainty, thinks uncertainty, it goes, okay, let me fill it in with gaps. It's not really happening. It's like when COVID happened and we all said, oh, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. That was the denial that we were seeing at that particular time. But what we want to do as we lead our teams through this complex time is that we want to move from that state of denial into a state of curiosity. Because what curiosity does, as much as there is that level of uncertainty, it moves you into a toward state where you're going, okay, so I understand that there is a little bit of uncertainty, but if I'm going to be hungry to understand, it puts you in a different perspective. And that's the type of individuals we need in our teams. Individuals that are hungry to understand, that are curious. And curiosity for me really is all about asking questions and wanting to understand some of these complex situations. Have a look at this. In this picture, there are two different men. There is a sad man and there's an angry man. Now head over to the chat box. Let me know which one do you see. Okay, someone has their mic on. Please turn that off for me. Thank you. All right. Okay. Thank you, Sam. Chiedza, thank you. You're trying to see the happy one. There is no happy one, Sam. There is a sad one and there's an angry one. So let me know if you can see which one of those you can see. Cool. So if you can see the sad one, that's perfectly all right. And that's the one that sticks out to us, right? That's the one that looks like he's sort of looking up. And that's the default. That's the default that you and I jump to. But in order, okay, Google, you see a bird. Okay, that's interesting. I've never gotten that one before. You need to show me where that is later on when you and I get to chat. So a lot of the time, the default for most of us is exactly that, to see the sad man because he's positioned in a way that makes him obvious. And I think that this is such an important statement that I'm about to make, is that sometimes as leaders in VUCA times, what we do is we look at what we're shown. And we fail to understand that there's actually something happening beneath that. And that's where we need to start to look. If you're tracking an issue, ask yourself what's happening under the surface. Because it's the leaders that can look under the surface that are really going to make a very big difference in their organizations, to their teams, and in their own lives as well. So now let's have a look. Okay, Robinson, I see you say, Robinson, you say you see both. Awesome, awesome. So what you're going to need to do, and I promise this works, I'm not playing around with you, making you look silly. If you cover the man's eye that's closest to the words, whether you use your hand, whether you just sort of shut it out, whatever you do, just cover that eye that's closest to the words. And then this is the part that makes it all happen. Tilt your head slightly to the left. So cover the eye that's closest to the words, and then tilt your head slightly to the left. And then tell me now, do you see the angry man? You can head over to the chat box and let me know if you can see him now, if he's coming across a little bit now. And you'll notice that the sad man's ear has actually now turned into the angry man's eye, other eye. Awesome, Gugu, love it. Caroline, I see you say you're also seeing him. Excellent stuff. Wonderful. Now, what you'll notice as you, and please, if you're just seeing it now, you can head over to the chat box, let me know about that. But what you'll notice is that to see something that's underneath the surface, you and I need to maneuver. We need to maneuver, and sometimes it needs us to look silly, where we turn our heads to the left and we cover eyes and we look like we're not too sure what we're doing. But that's the exact type of maneuvering that leaders who are winning in VUCA times are doing. They are shifting their perspectives. They are trying things. They are experimenting in ways that they haven't before, because they understand that there's what we see and then there's what's happening. But most of us are stuck right at what we see and we don't understand what's actually happening. That's the type of leader you and I need to become as we move through these times. And so that's the first one. It's this idea of moving from denial into curiosity. And curiosity is this delicious state of consistently asking questions. What's going on here? What's that? Why do we do things like that in this organization? Is there a better way of doing this? Why does she always say that? Is that really what's going on? Why are those the numbers? Why do they look like that? Those types of questions. And for me, I love this idea of intended ignorance, because it's say you intend it, you're intentionally going, I don't understand. I don't actually understand what's going on there. Let's break it down. Let me understand it at its depth. And it's the leaders that don't mind looking like they don't understand, because unfortunately we're now living in a time where leaders go, I don't actually I know everything. I don't want to ask questions because asking questions makes it look like we don't quite understand what we're doing. But this is not the time to think like that. This is the time to go, I want questions. I prefer the questions to the answers, because the answers are making us feel content. They are making us feel like there's nothing for us to discover, and they stump our curiosity. So I want the questions, because the questions allow us to explore. They allow us to think of what else is possible. What else can we do? Where else can we venture as a team? Because you want to be one of those teams that's always moving, always on top of the next big thing, always looking at what else there is. And some examples of teams that do exactly that. Venture out and get things wrong and try things and explore and do this and do that. Let me see, this chat box is looking very active. Lol, I'm using my laptop and my head was literally on the table. Fortunately, we couldn't see that, so don't worry about it. It didn't take a little tilt for me. Awesome, Chiam, we love it. Loving the interaction, guys. All right, so these are just a few examples of some teams that did experiment, some teams that did maneuver and tilt their heads to the side, even sometimes at the expense of their brands and what we knew their brands to be. Just to run you through one or two of them, Cheetos, who we all know and love for their amazing cheesy chips, tried a lip balm at one stage of the business. Unfortunately, wasn't a huge success, but hey, it's just one of those things, right? And one of my personal favorites, bottom right-hand corner, that was Colgate and their frozen food selection. So they brought out a whole bunch of different flavors of frozen food and different products within a frozen food variety of products. Unfortunately, also didn't quite work out, but very interesting, right? How certain brands that have a lot to lose can put themselves out in that way. Unfortunately, not so much to lose because they are a lot bigger. They can experiment without necessarily getting it, but there are benefits, pros and cons to both. And the idea here is that you want to keep that curiosity alive. And that's the type of organization that you want to build as you lead your people through change and then also into change as well. So that's the first sort of transition. It's moving from denial to a state of curiosity. And then the second one that I want to introduce to you is moving from detachment to ownership. Now, let me explain this idea of detachment. What disruption does to a lot of organizations is it gives us a hot potato type of scenario. And if you've heard of the idea of the hot potato, you'll know that it moves from one hand to the other and nobody wants to hold it for long enough to take accountability. And that's what happens during disruption and during such complex and volatile times where each and every one of us are going, oh my goodness, there's just so much going on here that I don't want to own it. But when we do start to take ownership of what's going on, we take accountability for where we've made mistakes and where things haven't gone right. What we do is we open ourselves up as organizations to so much more possibilities and so much more capacity than we knew we had before. And so this one for me is a really, 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 really important one. It's going from the detachment, going, I don't know what happened there. It was HR's problem. Or no, it was the PA, she did that, but we take accountability, not just for our actions, but also for each other. And not just that, but for our impact on the environment and where we are involved in all of the different systems in which we are part. I'll give you an example. The image that you see on your screen, it's not a cockroach, I promise. If you're in KZN, that was probably your first thought because we've got our share of cockroaches down here in this part of South Africa, but that's not a cockroach, I promise. What you see on your screen at the moment is called an Australian jewel beetle. So the Australian jewel beetle is a very interesting animal. And the story goes that there were two biologists or entomologists that were driving down an Australian highway. So they were driving down, and then they got off their vehicle and they started to sort of walk and hike down this Australian highway. And they found that there were little brown beer bottles, short ones. They call them stubbies in Australia, just sort of lying across the road. And I think we have this quite a lot, whatever country you're in. This is a very popular practice to throw beer bottles out of the window. And so this is what had been done on this Australian highway. But when they took a closer look, they noticed that there were Australian jewel beetles sort of hunched on these beer bottles. I mean, Australian jewel beetles were hunched on these bottles. They took a closer look and they found out that these were male Australian jewel beetles. Now, I don't mean anything by that. This is just how everything went. Not that the males like the beer and the females don't. That's not the point of the story. When they took an even closer look, they noticed that the genitalia of the beetles was averted. So they were attempting to mate with the jewel beetles, with the actual bottles. But here's the interesting thing. If you look at the bottom of the stubby or of the bottle, you notice that it's dotted with, it's sort of studded and it's got that golden brown color, which is exactly what the female Australian jewel beetle looks like. So what was going on with the male Australian jewel beetles is that they were jumping towards these beer bottles and thinking that they were female Australian jewel beetles and starting to mate with them. But here's the sad parts of that story, and I get a lot of people who find the story quite humorous. But here's the not so exciting parts of that story, is that the Australian jewel beetle population was actually negatively affected. So they lost a great percentage of male Australian jewel beetles just because of this practice. And by the time the beer manufacturers actually realized what was happening, they'd already had this immense effect on the population. And so that's why I say that ownership is really important, because if you and I can understand that as a business, as an individual, as a leader, this is the role that I'm playing in my ecosystem, if we can call that, or the system of my business, then I can take accountability for some of the things that are not going so right. So it's this idea of systems thinking that's so important that I think we've unfortunately sort of lost along the way here and there of understanding what role we're playing. And in that ownership is owning the diversity that we have in our teams. What are the different forms of diversity that we sit with around our tables? Take that and own it. Because once we understand that diversity, we can leverage it. Because like we saw in that image of the sad and the angry man and the one of the numbers and the mistake, is that diversity is beautiful because it means diversity of perspectives. And we know there have been numerous case studies of marketing teams and individuals that have put out campaigns that have been not so great, if we can call it that, because they didn't leverage their diversity. So that's one thing we can own, is our diversity. And when we own our diversity, it opens us up to understanding how we can learn, how we can make the most of learning within our organizations and capitalize on that to make us into these adaptable individuals that can adjust to the different changes that we see within our organizations. Cool. So now we'll move on to the last one, and then we'll open up for Q&A that I'm super excited about. And the very last transition that you need to make as a leader who's leading in these exciting times is moving from neglect to purpose, or purpose-driven business, or purposeful business. And this is a big sort of trend that we're tracking at the moment, very, very popular one amongst organizations, because organizations understand that not just millennials or zillennials, as they're now calling them, but each and every individual is now becoming very driven to be part of an organization that is purposeful, an organization that serves, an organization, if you think about that idea of the ecosystem and the system, individuals and organizations that are serving their systems and making the world a better place. So whether this is contributing to the green economy, whether it's climate change, sustainability, whatever it is that the organization is doing, if they are purposeful, we can rally behind them and support them. And if you're a leader who's leading in these times, if you are missing the idea of aligning to purpose, then you're going to miss out, not just on your margins, but in other ways, very, very big time. So let's move away from neglect and going up. Not really my problem that the jewel beetles are dying. I'm not going to take ownership of that, but let's align ourselves to that purpose. Let's see how we're changing people's lives. How are we serving our clients? How are we really, really making a difference? Because in such complex and volatile times, you want to be the leader who's leading your business into purpose. People stay and they shoot the lights out at organizations where they know that there's a purpose and the purpose is clear. And this is probably one of the more important ones, all of them being important, but this one is really, really quite key as a transition that you want to make in these really, really exciting times. And so the question really becomes, when we're thinking more specifically about purpose and this idea of moving from neglect into purpose, is that what will be different? What's going to be different about the way we lead in the next year? And when I say in the next year, I'm talking about from today, because today is when you're going to press the reset button. From today until next year, this day, 28th of March, what's going to be different in the next year? How are you going to lead differently? What are the transitions you're going to make as a business leader at this time when you can't afford not to make those changes? Cool. Thank you so much for your time today. Those are my details. If you want to keep the conversation going, please do contact me. I didn't put my Instagram handle there, but I am on Instagram as well. If you're a grammer, as they call it, goodness, I'm revealing my age so much today. But if you do that type of thing, please do reach out to me. Would love to have a conversation and then carry on the conversation. If there are questions you didn't get to ask during the session, let's hook up and have those conversations there. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, wow, very, very profound and insightful lessons there, Zanele. Many thanks, of course, for that presentation. Truly, truly fantastic. And of course, as Zanele just said, yeah, it's now open for questions, and she's ready to take answers. I hope that you took your details. Yeah, we already know your age. You gave it away so many times, Zanele, with your colloquial language. But nonetheless, we open. Just hit up the inbox if I'm going to continue on that path. As we're getting those questions coming through, Zanele, my first question from what you presented has to do with the issue of, the whole VUCA concept. And businesses, we understand, thrive in systems, and they thrive in a certain way of consistently doing business, right? And so how do you balance the agility of leading in VUCA times with setting up systems for sustainability?
Well, thank you so much for that question, McDonald. Great question. So yeah, you make a very good point. Systems, systems, systems. I always say, really, you are nothing without your systems. Absolutely. And so I think there is not necessarily a balancing act that needs to happen. I think your question was, how do we balance between systems and then also leading in these times? Was that the question? And I think that...
Yes, more with the issue of the agility, yeah, because they seem disconnected.
They do sometimes seem very disconnected. So I would say that systems shouldn't be something that's separate from our agility, but our systems need to be agile. So I always say that there needs to be a certain part of the system that's set, whether it's the reporting hierarchy or whatever it is, or maybe that certain things need to go through a certain channel. But the other parts of the structure or the system need to be very nimble. We need to be open to doing them in different ways. So let me give you an example. If the system dictates that if I want to get approval on a budget, I have to contact the CFO. That part is set, but the medium through which I do it, which is part of the system, needs to be nimble. It can be, I can even do it via, people are using platforms like Facebook Workplace now, Google Teams, Microsoft Teams, or whatever it is to do those types of things. So a certain part of it can be set, but let's keep the rest of it sort of agile and nimble to be done in whatever way that we can, because it does make it a lot easier for us to navigate our way through the system if parts of it can be changed and are open to change. And I believe that there's always a better way. And sometimes it's the employees in the team that know what the better way is. Just like our customers actually know where our pain points are and what we should be doing better. Hope that sort of helps.
Thank you very much. Made it clearer there. Let's just get to the inbox and conversations here. Tatlamo says, yeah, my takeaway is that it's never only about me, but about how the decisions I make affects the entire ecosystem within which I am part of. We also have another message coming through from Nim here saying, thank you, very insightful. And quite an interesting comment coming through there from TMO saying that my individual decision really affects the entire ecosystem.
Exactly. Really, really important one. I don't think we can afford to do that anymore, hey? If you look at brands like your Nike, if you look at brands like your Unilever, that have really started to take a stand when it comes to the environmental effects that they're having. Because what happens with organizations that do have such a profound effect on whether it's carbon emissions or whatever it is within the environment, if they don't take a stand against that, then they become an unsustainable organization, or an organization that can't get buy-in in terms of the last concept we spoke about, which is purpose. And so you really want to be consistently conscious around the effects that you're having in the ecosystem, because what that allows us to do is it allows us to cross-collaborate and partner and actually be a business that drives good. And this big idea now that we're seeing quite a lot in our team at Tomorrow Today, which our consulting branch works with, is using business as a force for good. And when you are system conscious or ecosystem conscious, your business can be a force for good, because you're looking at where you're affecting the system, whether it's positively or negatively, and what some of your long stretches can sort of be as you affect and make that better as well. I hope that helps with the question.
It definitely makes it more clear. Once again, we are open to the floor. If anybody wants to contribute, you can just go ahead and raise your hand if you want to go on and be part of the conversation, or maybe you can just go on in there and just inbox it. Another message coming through from Nim here saying, a lot of organizations have shifted from advertising or marketing their actual products to marketing self-care.
Lovely. That's a very interesting insight. Sorry, McDonald. That's a very interesting insight that Nim has given. And I can see how she would think that, because it has happened with a range of different brands. Because what they've done there, and this is something we did speak about, is they've noticed the trend of self-care. Because what COVID-19 has actually done, if you look at the data, it's made you and I a lot more conscious around taking care of ourselves. So a numerous number of brands have gone, how can we align our brand, our marketing, our advertising, our sales even, to this idea of self-care, and then sell it on the back of COVID-19? Because, and this is funny, I won't mention any names, but even beauty brands have even started to go, we're not just beauty based, but we're also really, really great for taking care of yourself, or our product has a certain percentage of germ killing effects or whatever it is. So they've been tracking the trend and they're trying to actually align themselves to that trend. Very interesting insight.
Thank you once again to Neem for that particular contribution there regarding the issue of the transitions. We're in a very, very interesting times. Chiamo comes in laughing a bit. I also saw that brand Zanele. All right, so we're not naming any. It's as clear as mud, as my mentor would say. But going on ahead, we're living in unprecedented times, times that our generation have never experienced. If we talk about the boom in knowledge because of the internet, we've seen the past decade produce more billionaires than any other time in history. We've also seen great depressions happening across economies that we thought would never be shaken. And more recently, this COVID-induced lockdowns bringing this level of uncertainty. How much now regarding the future can we sort of predict, if at all, or how can we position ourselves to be ready for any other changes, because the changes have been coming and they've been so rapid?
That is probably the best question we've had, because a lot of people will ask, especially if you walk into a room and you introduce yourself as a futurist, what a lot of individuals will ask is, predict the future. What's going to happen in the next 10 years? What can we look forward to? And that really isn't the biggest question. The biggest question is not what are we going to see in the future, because I've got no crystal ball. I'm a futurist, yes, but I don't have a crystal ball. So that's not the main question. And I love the one you asked, because that is the real question. How do we prepare ourselves so that we can face whatever it is that the future does give us? And I think that the really important answer to that question is then, is equipping ourselves in terms of the skills that we need to have, and adaptability being one of the biggest ones. If you can equip yourself to be completely adaptive, then that's probably your best defense against a consistently changing times. And with a consistently changing time, and with that sense of adaptability, also comes skills. And skills that play a very, very big part in it. I always say that there are 3 different ways that an organization and a team or a leader can sort of skill themselves for the future of work. It's this idea of future skilling, it's this idea of reskilling, and then it's this idea of upskilling. And I break them each down in different ways. But the point is that you skill yourself for the work that you're doing right now. If there's a new software update that's come out at the moment, you need to know how to use it so you can stay in your job. And then the next one, upskilling. If you look into the future of your job specifically, what are you going to need to have that's going to keep you relevant in that line of work? Whether it's understanding certain AI that's going to come into your work, how do you equip yourself with the skills to master that? And then future skilling for me are the skills that may not be related to your work right now. I've got individuals in certain firms that are learning to code, even though they're part of sales, or they're learning to code, but they're part of marketing. Future skilling is about the skills that may not have anything to do with your work at the moment, but because you've identified, if we go back to the presentation, that you started to track, and they are skills that you know are vital for the future of work, you started working on them, then you have set yourself up for success, because those skills are going to start to be more and more in demand, and you don't want to start from scratch when they start to get a little bit more in your face. So become adaptable, whether you are consistently changing in your own life, working on being adaptable. And that way, I always say, try brush your teeth with the different hand, do something that just makes your brain better at changing. And then skills. That was a long way of answering that question, but that's what I've got.
No, thank you. Very, very clear there. Robson coming through here and saying that Zanele Maverick, I love the topic you present.
Oh, I see Roberson's comment. He says, Zanele, you're a maverick. Thank you, Roberson. I love the topic you presented. Yes, we're in VUCA times, and we're all under pressure to be disruptors. What are the building blocks of staying in the game? Do you have to be changing business models every week? No, you don't. You don't have to be changing business models every week, fortunately. But I think that the building blocks are the ones that I mentioned. Work on your adaptive capacity. Whether it's getting yourself used to changing, reading different things, speaking to different people, it makes you better at changing. And I think we need to just get better at changing as individuals and as teams. And then the other one is the skills. Get the skills in your basket. You won't regret it. You may not use them now, but they'll definitely come in handy someday. So I'd say those are the really two key things. And I hope that really helps, Roberson. But you and I are connected, I think, on LinkedIn already. Happy to have the rest of this conversation offline and sort of extend on some of those points.
All right, Zanele, our time fast running out on us now. But if we have any other questions, they'll just quickly jump onto our inbox. But your concluding remarks, Zanele, before we give it to Uno.
Cool. So concluding remarks, I think there isn't too much outside of what I've said, but just that we shouldn't let the future of work scare us. The robots are probably going to destroy all of us, but not yet. Sorry, that's a joke. But hey, who knows, right? Because if you think about how intelligent the robots are getting, they are getting quite intelligent, but they are only that. And this is what a colleague of mine often says. It's not, don't think of it as artificial intelligence, but think of it as intelligent assistance. How can you leverage technology, artificial intelligence, cloud mobility, additive manufacturing, whatever it is, how are you leveraging it to help you? Or are you still sitting in your office doing swivel chair work that you could easily automate? So I think that that's one thing we need to ask ourselves. How am I leveraging technology to assist me intelligently? And that's the way to work in the future. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Zanele, what a presentation.